Okay. Well, we'll get started regardless. Mr. Keck, you were the one to file first, so you will have the opportunity to make your 2-minute opening statement first.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Roy Keck. I'm requesting your vote in support of my re-election for the Port of Benton Commissioner. I have served as the Port of Benton Commissioner for 12 years, and I'm currently the board president. During my 12 years on the commission, I've collaborated successfully and repeatedly with the communities that I serve. It is very important for me that the port acts with a high degree of professionalism, integrity, and transparency, as we recognize that we work for you. Economic development requires the ability and the willingness to partner with many other public and private sector entities and stakeholders. As Commissioner, I will continue to use my understanding of the community, my education, and experience to promote economic development and job growth for the region. I grew up here in Richland, attended Richland High, CBC, WSU Tri-Cities. I have 4 grown kids and 9 grandkids, and my mom, and we all live here. I retired from Energy Northwest as a senior project manager after 35 years. After I retired, my son and I built and operate a small business here in Richland. I'm a graduate of Leadership Tri-Cities Class 4, and then I served 6 years on the LTC boards. I also served 12 years here in the City of Richland's Economic Development Committee. And I served another 14 years here on the City of Richland's Utilities Advisory Committee. And Bob Thompson talked about some of the savings that we got on that committee. I'm currently on the TriDeck Board of Directors, the Richland Rotary Board of Directors, very active in the Tri-City Regional Chamber and Richland Yacht Club. During my 12 years on the Port of Benton Commission, I also served on the Washington Public Ports Association Board for 5 years and was the president of the association in 2015, representing and advocating for all the ports in the state. I would appreciate your support and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keck. Mr. O'Neill, your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Bill O'Neill. I was born and grew up here in Richland. I'm also a graduate of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I've got a degree in aeronautical engineering as well as a degree in aviation business administration. I made the majority of my professional career was with NASA as a flight test engineer. After returning here to the Tri-Cities, I worked at Hanford for a bit in project management before starting 2 small businesses here in Richland. On a personal side, my wife and I, over the last 30 years, have built and flown 3 experimental airplanes. The reason I'm running for commissioner is to ensure the continued development of both the Richland and the Prosser airports. I do not want them to end up closing like Vista Field did at Kennewick. I'm also running as a small business owner to be a strong advocate for local small businesses, ensuring that the port resources are equally shared between large and small projects. Currently, the Department of Energy is working on a land transfer agreement with the Port of Benton as well as the City of Richland. It's a great project, but it's going to take many years and millions of dollars to develop before any business can even start to build on it. So I want to ensure that small businesses are getting their fair share of port resources. And finally, I think the biggest benefit I can bring to the port as well as this community is my experiences and contacts in aviation. Every year I fly all over this country and I meet hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, many business owners. And when I get a chance to speak to them about our area and the population base and the weather here and the development opportunities, particularly the airports, they get extremely excited about potentially moving or expanding their business here. So I appreciate your support in becoming the next commissioner for the Port of Benton.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. It looks like we're getting some audience questions, so thank you guys for writing those out. We'll begin with one that's already been vetted, though. The North Horn Rapids area is planned for future industrial, manufacturing, and research businesses. What type of business would you like to recruit, and is a recycling plant an option? And Mr. Keck, you will go first.
Repeat the question, please. No, sir.
The North Horn Rapids area is planned for future industrial, manufacturing, and research-related business. What type of business would you like to recruit, and is a recycling plant a viable option?
A recycling would be a viable option if it was placed in the right place and it was for the right reason. I don't, if it was just recycling the garbage, or we already have a couple of those recycling facilities here. If we needed another one, that'd be a good place to put one. It's an industrial site. So, yes, under the right circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Keck. Mr. O'Neill.
Sure. If you've driven out the Highway 240 there, looked alongside the road on the way to the Horn Rapids development, you can see a lot of small businesses popping up there. And so I look at that as the area that is growing and would be a nice area to continue. But also the port has other pieces of property in North Richland that we ought to look at doing the same thing. As far as recycling, I think we'd have to look and see what the current recycling plant's needs are. Are they maximized or not? Could we expand that operation? For sure. I guess we just need a little more information before I can help make that decision.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. And Mr. O'Neill, you will get to take the first audience question. What is the port willing to do to mitigate the traffic problems new and bigger businesses in the port?
Well, let's see. It would probably be in the North Richland area. Again, we'd have to look at the traffic flow into the Richland Business Park, the technology development area, and see what the traffic problems might be there. I'm not aware of any at this point, being so new to this process. But we certainly look into it and see what we might need to do with the city to improve any traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Keck. I apologize. Mr. Keck, you're up next.
Thank you. There is a couple of traffic issues related to the port's properties, and it's not necessarily the vehicle traffic. Right now, we're experiencing some challenges relative to our railroad crossings. And we need to, in fact, we are in the process of looking at our options to first fix the railroad crossings with on Van Giesen, 240, and some of the other intersections that we're all kind of frustrated with. Additionally, then we have an issue with our rail speed. So we're also working on repairing and improving our rail system so that the trains can go a little faster so they won't be blocking the traffic nearly so long. So there is a couple of things that we could do and are doing to mitigate some of the impacts associated with our rail service on our city streets. So thank you.
And I owe you a thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Keck, you will go first on this next question. What changes would you like to see in port management?
In port management, right now we're in the process of transitioning over to another executive director. In fact, we have a search out right now for a new executive director, and whoever our new executive director is going to be is going to take on a challenge to enhance or improve our organization relative to its professionalism and its transparency and its its professionalism. So yeah. So we're in that process right now, and we'll be concluding that pretty soon.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, there's been a considerable issue with the staff there at the port over the last 4 months, starting with the executive director being forced out. A highly qualified individual came in and lasted 2 weeks and quit. And then the director of airport operations, after 27 years, submitted an immediate resignation. And then the caretakers at the Crow's Butte Park was recently terminated. So I don't know the issues there, but all of this has taken place in the last 4 months. So certainly it's going to take a really good executive director to turn that around. It's a very small staff, probably 10, 12 people. So you really need to be able to lead those folks. And given their history, the port staff, an amazing group of people that took the port from $10 million to $80 million in assets over the last 15 years. And that was led by an exceptional executive director that is now retired. So yeah, I agree with Mr. Keck that it all starts with a new executive director, the right executive director. I wish we would have done it a little differently and took enough time to research and find the right person and transition that person with the existing director in place to minimize the impact to the staff. That didn't happen, so we'll see what happens going forward.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. And you get to go first on our final question for you guys. What would you tell people if they asked you if the tax money the Port of Benton receives is well spent?
Okay, I would say yes and no. Let's start with the yes. Certainly the business development parks, what's happened in Prosser with the Vintner Village. Benton City is a great example of the downtown area. They fixed up a couple of buildings, turned it over to a Subway, a glass blowing shop, et cetera. And that kind of spurred on the development of other companies or businesses in that area to clean up their part of downtown Benton City. So yes, they've spent their tax money wisely there. But we've also been looking into some of the travel issues or travel and conferences that they've been going on. And the budget is $160,000 a year for 3 commissioners to go to conferences and stay at the Ritz-Carlton and go on fishing trips. And so we need to, have a really good look at that. And for my part of it, if those conferences really don't yield a benefit, I don't want to go. So if I can save at least a third of the portion and put that back into our community, I will do that.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, and thank you, Mr. Keck, for both being here tonight. Once again, they are vying for a spot. I don't know why I keep forgetting you, Mr. Keck, or thanking you when I shouldn't. I'm just all excited about these questions. So, Mr. Keck, would you like to answer this one? You would?
What?
You would like to answer this one?
What was the question?
What would you tell people if they asked you if the tax money the Port of Benton receives is well spent?
The answer is absolutely yes, is that we get about $2 million a year of tax, and we have a budget of $14 million. And about $2 million of it is a year is from taxes, and we dedicate almost every year 100% of that $2 million to new capital acquisitions, whether it's buildings, properties, and assets. So we don't use any of that money for O&M or A&G. So all of our tax dollars goes back into equity ownership of assets that are publicly owned. So my answer is absolutely yes.
Now, thank you, Mr. Keck. And yes, thank you both for being here tonight. You both deserve a big round of applause. And once again, they are both vying for a spot on the Port of Benton.